Hello, everybody. This is the new classical piano syllabus webinar, Conservatory Canada. We recently launched this new classical piano syllabus in September of 2018. And this is just a short information session, only be 30 or 40 minutes, to break down some of the different components of it and maybe answer some of your questions that you may have about it. Of course, going forward at any time, feel free to reach out to us, and I'll have our contact information at the end of the last slide for you to see. This is a new ad that we've been running across the country the last couple of years that talks about our flexible new options for exams. Some of the things that I'll talk about today are flex theory exams, free approvals to choose your own repertoire, new contemporary idioms piano syllabus, and pre-grade 1 piano exams. These are some of the things that we're currently offering. And I'll go into a bit more detail as we go here. Trends in modern studio teaching, this is usually where I like to start. It's things that we've heard from teachers across the country and trends that we see that sort of inform some of the decisions that we make in terms of how we provide the material that we provide for you. More teachers are teaching students in groups now, we find. It's not the majority of teachers, that's for sure, but there's something about the social experience that families and students seem to like, and some teachers are dabbling with that and trying it out. Within that is the recreational music making movement. It's really quite popular in the United States, and this is where teachers may get a bunch of keyboards in a room with a group of students, even adults, and they form these jamming groups. Again, part of it is the social experience, but being able to play in an ensemble is something that usually isn't emphasized in piano playing, and something that I think more and more people are experimenting with. I know Conservatory Canada, we took a look at this and did it for a number of years through our Cool Keys camps in the summer with students. They were hugely successful. They were a lot of fun. And you can still see some of the videos on our website from those events. Students are looking to learn music that's more relevant to their social experience. We're hearing reports that it's harder to sell the old sonatinas and minuets. Baroque and classical music isn't overly fashionable for a lot of students. And so that's why we created our contemporary idioms piano syllabus a number of years ago now. And its latest version, I think, is quite usable and something you may want to take a look at. Teachers and students are engaging in technology as they learn now. Even through this format, the webinar format here today that you're watching, you can watch this information on demand anytime, engaging with our website, engaging on social media, of course, using mobile devices and apps. All these things sort of play a part in modern studio teaching nowadays. And we've got all sorts of ideas. Our e-exam platform I'll talk about in a little bit as well. It's sort of a great way that we're engaging in technology and have been for the last 10 years. Schedules and convenience are becoming top priorities for families and teachers now, and students. You probably noticed it's a little more difficult to work with your students in terms of getting them to come at a regular time every week all year long. It's harder to find those students now that are able to commit to that and that have it as a high enough priority that they can stick with you for that same time slot all year long. And so we find that we have to bend and adjust, a lot of us, and be flexible with that scheduling. The emphasis seems to have shifted a bit or quite a bit, depending on who you're talking with, on to the experience rather than the learning, or what we perceive is not as much on the learning. The younger generation, they're learning things in different ways now, and it challenges us teachers to try and keep up and figure out how to engage them on their terms and keep them engaged in lifelong music learning. Overall, we find much less practice time for students. They're scheduled into many different activities, and so sometimes that doesn't allow them to practice daily as maybe they used to. And so within that too, throughout the year, they're practicing in waves, in short bursts of curiosity, where suddenly they're engaged with you for 3 weeks, and then maybe not so much for the next 6 weeks, and then back again, they're practicing more. And so we're trying to develop ways within our exam syllabi and the way that we schedule exams so that you can be flexible with those students and keep them engaged in these assessments. What makes Conservatory Canada different than the other institutions that there are out there in Canada or in North America? Number one, I think, is more time with the examiner. Our grade 1 exam is a full 20 minutes long in the exam room. By grade 8, it's 40 minutes. We don't cut students off when they're playing their pieces. They can play the repeats in the Baroque music, and in some of the pop stylings, they're allowed to make those renditions, or there's versions that they like. And the examiner will always hear the music in their entirety. We don't cut them off or say that we've heard enough or anything like that. We want them to feel comfortable and rehearse or play everything for us that they have rehearsed. Mini lesson with the examiners is something that the students can sign up for. It's a 15-minute session at the end of the exam. You have to register for it in advance so that we can schedule it. The examiner works with the student, and perhaps even the teacher and the family can come into the exam room, and maybe they have questions for the examiner, or the examiner can just be invited to take over and comment on anything that they found relevant given what they heard in the examination. It's a great way to break down some of the traditional barriers between examiner and student and open that exam space up a little bit, again, to create an experience for the student. Background questions, something we used to call viva voce. This is where the student is providing oral answers to various questions the examiner might pose based on the music being played. I'll comment on that a little bit more later. Keyboard harmony, improvisation, and other important skills that make well-rounded musicians. This is something that we really have always believed in and we're trying to preserve. And so I'll talk about keyboard harmony a little bit more later on at the end, and I'll show you some actual examples. The own choice piece, or what we used to call the supplementary piece. This is free choice by the student and the teacher to work on and present something on the exam that's of special interest to the student that's not on our lists. You don't need prior approval for this particular component or this piece to use, but it does encourage originality. And there are different things that you can do within the own choice piece. Partial exams from grade level 7 and up. This is for those students that, again, need to take advantage of a short burst of curiosity where they need to, it's better for them to produce half the exam at a time, second half at a second sitting sometime within a year later to get the full certificate. Marking system, when we're marking, we mark everything to decimal 1. So a piece of music can get 8.9 out of 10. The final mark can be 83.9 out of 100. We don't use any rounding or anything like that. So we get a fair numerical assessment at the end of the process. Option for recital assessment. This is for pieces only, no skills. It's for those students that enjoy the performing aspect and want to play their repertoire, and the teacher perhaps gets a group of students together with the families in a recital hall, a well-chosen venue, and the examiner's there at the back of the hall evaluating, making their comments and their assessments. But the focus is only on the repertoire or the stage department. Maybe the student creates program notes, but they don't have to do technique, sight reading, ear training, keyboard skills. Those things aren't assessed on the recital assessments. The students can still get a certificate for that level. It's either junior, intermediate, or advanced. They just won't be able to use those for high school credit as we do with our other stream. We have two exam streams, the classical stream and the contemporary idiom stream we created about 10 years ago. You can see some of the differences there in those bullet points. These slideshow notes will be available as well on the website, so you can refer back to them in a PDF. But I'll talk and break down the classical stream a little bit today and how that works. Newer exam features. Within our contemporary idiom syllabi, we offer that for piano, voice, and guitar, and that's for contemporary repertoire, contemporary skills. Within that, there is a small component. You can include a classical piece in a contemporary exam. For students that really like that contemporary repertoire, but don't find the contemporary skills as approachable, we still have that option where students can play the contemporary exam, but they can substitute the classical skills for the contemporary skills, all of them all at once, so you don't have to look into the improv and that kind of thing on the contemporary exam. Flex or seasonal exams. Seasonal exams are the ones that happen every February, May, and August in our practical centers across the country. The flex exams are mainly done practically as an e-exam, where we connect two keyboards remotely using a piece of software so that whatever a student plays on their digital piano, the examiner can hear coming out of their speakers exactly how it was intended in real time. And they communicate using Skype as well on video. So the examiner also gets a readout on the screen of exactly what the notation, that the keys are being pressed and how the pedals are being used and what the key velocity looks like, so they can verify what they're hearing. They can see all the detail and hear all the detail and more that they need, as if they were right there in the room. 1/4 of our exams are now done by e-exams, and students, they report feeling much less anxiety in the exam room without the examiner actually there. They're usually playing on an instrument that's more familiar with them. The family doesn't have to drive to the nearest center and wait in line, wait in turn for their exam. It's all scheduled within 2 weeks' notice. It's just a really great way to take advantage of when a student peaks and has got everything ready to go. We schedule those e-exams, and again, 25% of our students are now doing it in this way. Flex theory, same kind of concept. The exams are scheduled with 2 weeks' notice whenever the student is ready. A teacher may get a group of students or one student together with a presiding officer that they choose. The exam gets sent to the presiding officer the night before by email in a scan. They print out the exam and give it to the student. After it's done, it gets scanned and sent back by the presiding officer to the office, who marks it fairly quickly. There's reports, some teachers say that even within 24 hours that exam is marked with the results uploaded to the portal for you to see. So those are some of our newer exam features. In addition to partial theory exams, we've now launched, those are our rudiments exams, theory 1, 2, and 3. You can break them into 2 distinct parts that we outline in our syllabus. Free irregular list approvals, I'll talk about this later, or I'll mention it a few times actually in this webinar. That's where you can take and scan any piece that you want to use that's outside of our regular lists, but you feel like it would be a good inclusion on the exam for the student. And our office will appraise that for you within usually a day or two and send you back an approval letter that you can present to the examiner that says this piece is good for use on a grade 5 classical piano exam as a group 1 or a group 2 choice, whatever you decide it should be. We'll appraise and verify that what you're thinking is correct. There's a free approval process, and that goes for all instruments, all grade levels now too. And you can do multiple pieces on an exam. And again, it's really good for those students that are especially doing contemporary repertoire, or you've got pieces in your library that you want to use that the student really likes, or they have found something that's not on our lists yet. We can certainly approve those for you. The pre-grade 1 exam experience is a great way for families to be introduced to the exam process in a nice, safe environment. The families and the teacher can come into the exam for the whole time. It's a 15-minute session. About 6 or 7 minutes is focused on playing a few simple pieces that you choose with the student. You have a lot of latitude in terms of what you can choose out of your method books or whatever resources you're using. Some simple techniques, sight reading, and your training tests. And then 7 or 8 minutes is left for a mini lesson with the examiner where you can break down and just have a nice experience with the families and get them used to what the exam experience is like and what it looks like behind the closed doors. Some of our newest options, the newest classical piano syllabus course we're going to talk about today, we have a new piano pedagogy research exam, which is a written component after a student registers for pedagogy. They get a series of 20 or 24 questions, which they write up answers to, scholarly answers, using a 2-volume text that we recommend. And the questions are dedicated straight to that textbook. It's great for those students who don't have a mentor, perhaps, even though we recommend that. They can use the textbook and follow along and learn a lot more, I think, than our old program did. We have forthcoming revisions, classical vocal. By the time you hear this, you will be able to find the classical vocal syllabus that's been revised on our website. Contemporary idioms vocal is about to come out, and then further down the pipe in the next couple of years, we'll be launching a new guitar and other instrumental syllabi. So the new classical piano syllabus revisions, these are the first revisions that we've done since 1999 when Conservatory Canada was created out of a merger between the Western Ontario Conservatory of Music in Eastern Canada and the Western Board in Western Canada. And they found that a lot of the curriculum was already the same between them. And so they came together and created what we've been using for the last 20 years and has been known as Conservatory Canada. It was time to kind of rebalance the workload given some of the modern scheduling constraints and maybe less practicing that seems to be happening among most students in most regions, and also commit at the same time to keeping some of those progressive skills, although some of them maybe are now streamlined a little bit. So the workload is still quite rich. We still produce really well-rounded musicians, I feel. And some of the things you'll notice in the new syllabus, we have fewer repertoire choices with more flexibility for choice within the groups of repertoire. We've expanded the repertoire list quite a bit. We're still using our old publications. And again, we have those free approvals for irregular list pieces. Condensed technical requirements, sight and ear training remain similar to how they were in the past. And now our keyboard harmony, which we preserve, starts at grade 4 using a new workbook by Deborah Wanless that I'll outline in a little bit. Background information questions, that used to be called Viva Voce, we've still preserved that as well as a great value added thing to get students talking in exams. So when it comes to repertoire, our repertoire list, instead of the old ABC studies exams, which, you know, we were fond of, but it was time for an update on that. We divided and took all the repertoire, including the studies, and put them into 2 groups from grades 1 to 5. Group 1 is simply Baroque and classical style music, and group 2 is romantic and modern style pieces. Starting in grade 6, groups are added gradually to require more specificity for the music from various style periods. So early on, although you don't have to play Baroque music on the exams early on, we still want students and teachers to work with those styles so that they understand that those are important, so that when they do have that aptitude to go on to the higher levels, they're not suddenly overwhelmed because they've never learned Baroque music before when it's finally required in grade 6. Teachers that like the old ABC studies, the way it used to be, they can still use those, and I'll show you how you can do that later within this new grouping context. In terms of repertoire, the own choice pieces, again, they do not require any approval. And you can get free approval for any piece not on our list. Just simply scan and send it to the office with your request for which group you would like and grade level for that particular piece. Our Old New Millennium series publications, they remain unchanged. We decided not to change any of the old requirements or edit any of the old requirements in the back of the books. It's very costly to do that. And by the time that actually filters through the supply chain from the printer and so on and gets into the hands of the students, that would be 2 years. Even 2 years from now, you'd still see some of those old requirements floating around. By that time, we'd all be used to it. So one thing is you have to be on the alert for that the syllabus requirements in those old books, and if you find a hard copy of our piano syllabus, it's not the most recent one. The only place you're going to find the new requirements is on our website online, and that on our classical piano syllabus pages. You'll see the new syllabus there. We are going to publish a new table of contents with new relevant groupings that you can copy off or print off and paste that right into the books. Because we're no longer using ABC studies, you'll still see those headings in those old books, but we're grouping the music in a new way now on the syllabus. And that'll be quite clear in the syllabus docs, and the new table of contents should help alleviate any confusion about how those books are to be used. One of the group pieces may be of any grade higher, and as long as they're on a list of a higher grade, you can simply use those on the exam. And the own choice piece may also be of any grade level higher. I would urge teachers and students also to consult our contemporary repertoire list that is found in our contemporary idiom syllabus pages. That goes with the contemporary exam, but any of the music on that contemporary repertoire list can be used as a modern group choice on the classical syllabus. There's a lot of music there, especially a lot of Canadian music, and we have some publications that support those in nice albums, our Canadian Contemporary Repertoire series being one of those. So a lot of choice for modern music now that you'll find, and all that information again is available online on the website. We wanted to renew our commitment to promoting music by Canadian composers by awarding 1 bonus mark for performing a piece performed by a Canadian composer. The exam is still marked out of 100. This can be a group or an own choice piece, and all the Canadian compositions are noted with an asterisk in our syllabus. This encourages it. It's not mandatory. And in fact, a number of years it wasn't really mandatory, but we wanted to find a way to reward those students that were using Canadian music. We're great champions of Canadian music, I feel, and we have many sort of associate composers that we've featured over the years, and we're going to continue to do that. Photocopying is illegal. This is something that, of course, has always been this way, and something that we're going to enforce to a higher degree now. As soon as photocopies, if an examiner sees that photocopies have been brought into the room to give the examiner a copy, or for a student to play from, the examiner is going to stop the exam. We'll ask that the photocopies be destroyed. And if there is no original available, we need to produce an original copy before the exam can continue. In those cases where you only have 1 copy, maybe it's an old out-of-print edition and you can't obtain a second copy any longer, and the teacher or the student needs to play from that copy, they're allowed to play from that original copy. The examiner will be looking over the shoulder though, so that they can see what's happening during that performance piece. So examiners and students both require original scores wherever possible. And we do ask you on exams too now to provide copies, even from the New Millennium series. It's too expensive for us to travel and with weight restrictions on airlines and such. Examiners can't carry the books around with them any longer. And so we do appreciate when you can provide second copies for all music being performed on all exams. Again, students risk forfeiting their exam if they rely on a photocopy to play from. A couple of questions often come up, and number one is around, legal downloaded copies, those that are downloaded for a fee, and it shows the license at the bottom. This piece is licensed for use for so-and-so by the publisher. Those can be used on the exam by all means. And even pieces that belong to the public domain that you can find on websites such as imslt.com, they provide scans of public domain music from old defunct copies or published copies. Those are allowed for use on exams as well. We will allow that. That's something that even universities have turned to using in coursework. Grade 1 mark distribution. This is a look at how the marks are broken down by grade, and you can see there are 4 pieces required at grade 1 and 2. 1 group 1 piece, that's a Baroque or classical. 1 group 2 piece, that's romantic or modern. And then a group 1 or a group 2 piece, it's at your own choice, all of those from the lists, or an own choice piece, which again, and an own choice piece. Within this kind of scheme, you can see that it's possible for students to learn even, let's say, 3 contemporary pieces if they wanted. the group 2 piece, the own choice piece, and the group 1 or group 2 piece. All of those could be a contemporary, jazz or rock or pop piece, with long as they have one group 1 piece that's in a Baroque or classical style. Conversely, if a student likes the old series and wants to do a Baroque piece, that could be the group 1. A classical piece would fit into the group 1 or group 2. A modern piece would fit into group 2, and then the own choice piece could maybe be an old-fashioned study. So if someone wanted to do an old-fashioned ABC studies exam, there certainly is room within this skeleton or this framework to do that. You can see there that we provide marks for memory, 2 marks for each piece. Scales and triads are part of technique. Sight reading and ear training with background information, often given or always given its own allotment of marks as well. Technique is always worth the most of any one chunk on the exam, but you can see, and later on, especially in the intermediate and senior levels, there are a lot of different evaluations, none of which is really worth a large chunk of marks. This makes, I think, a very fair assessment for the student, and always possible. If they have trouble on 1 or 2 elements, they still could score in the 80s, especially if they know their terms and signs. Background information is generally a fairly easy 8 marks. So going on here, grade 5 mark distribution. 2 group 1 pieces, 2 group 2 pieces. Within group 1, they can both be Baroque, they can both be classical, one of each is preferred. Doesn't really matter though. Within group 2, both can be romantic if students don't like contemporary music, or both can be contemporary, along with the own choice piece. Quite a bit of latitude in terms of what a student can do here. It can be classical heavy, it can be contemporary heavy, however they want to do it. As long as you have at least 1 Baroque and or classical piece, or 2 actually, 2 Baroque and or classical pieces on this exam, they will fit within the classical framework. Again, the rest of the marks you can see there. Keyboard skills usually worth 6 marks on the exam, and I'll break that down in a little bit exactly what that entails. By the time students get to grade 8, scroll forward here. In grade 8, by this point, they're required to have a Baroque piece on their program. They're required to have a classical piece, that's group 2. A romantic piece is necessary for group 3. Group 4 is contemporary and own choice. So still only 5 pieces, but now they have to have those. So it's a good thing for students early on to be able to learn all their Baroque and classical music, so they understand those styles by the time they get to this level. Still marks for memory, technique, sight reading, ear training, keyboard skills you see there. Background information only worth 6 marks by this point. And again, as always, 1 bonus mark you can see at the bottom for using any Canadian composition. So that's the grade 8 mark distribution. In terms of technique, each successive grade level adds 1 sharp and 1 flat. Starting at grade 2, students have to know everything with 1 sharp and 1 flat. Grade 3, 2 sharps and 2 flats. Grade 4, 3 sharps and 3 flats. Featuring smooth transitions between the levels, especially grade 6 to 10 now. Some teachers are asking, why do we do it this way? Why do we only have 2 octave arpeggios in grade 8? To make a smoother transition between things. We explore some blues, whole tone, contrary motion scale patterns early on, but by grade 5, we abandon those and try to simplify and streamline the requirements to make sure that students are at least practicing something just slightly beyond the minimum. So that by the time they got to grade 8, they would still know all of their scales, even though we don't have review keys and things like that anymore. We leave that up to the teacher to enforce. 7th chords now labeled according to their letter name, not their dominant or diminished function, and I'll show you an example of that. But instead of asking for the dominant 7th of B major, the examiner is simply going to ask for the A7 chord, left hand broken, or the A7 arpeggio with the right hand, or whatever it is. Overall, fewer keys to rehearse with a broader review beginning at grade 8. By grade 7, students have to do 6 sharps and 6 flats, and then grade 8, we start piling on the keys a little bit more as a good review. Teachers, you can still teach the broader requirements as you see fit. Students are much more reluctant these days, I think, to practice technique by and large, and there's reasons for that. We're trying to meet them part way at least and say, technique is still important. It's still worth more marks than anything else or any other component on the exam. But there are fewer keys to rehearse. You don't have to rehearse all these patterns. You can spend your time learning more repertoire, perhaps. Examiners are looking for fluency within a pulse that is steady. We're going to prefer that exercises be performed at a slower tempo without hesitations, errors, and inaccuracies. So students that are challenging the tempo always and stumbling through the requirements are going to score lower than they would by trying to show off workmanship and playing slowly under tempo with even even pulse. That's preferred, I think, at any level for an exam. Here's a look at what grade 4 technique looks like. Again, 3 sharps and 3 flats, relative minors. We always preserve the chromatic scales. We decided to keep those in. There are a couple of pentatonics there for fun, but within the triads and arpeggios, it's all just straightforward 4 keys all the way through. By the time we get to, oh, you know what, I'm going to show you just a quick look at what grade 8 looks like. I'm just going to deviate from my presentation for a moment here. Just bear with me. So if we look here, here's a look at the keys required for grade 8 technique. Major scales, harmonic, melodic, minor, chromatic. We do broken octaves instead of solid octaves at this level. And then 4-note chords, dominant and diminished sevenths. Again, the examiner will ask directly for an F7 chord or E diminished 7th chord. They won't ask for the diminished 7th of F minor or anything like that. Arpeggios are the same. You can see there are no contrary motion scales, no double thirds, no staccato scales throughout. Those things are still important, I think, valuable for students to work on. But within the context of the exam, we're no longer going to ask those things anymore. I'm just going to go back to my slideshow here for you. So going on to sight reading and ear training, these remain largely the same as they were before, especially the sight reading, not much change there. We've got examples in the syllabus to show you the approximate grade level for these things. And our E-sharp club will be populated with some resources. One of our associate composers and examiners, Andrew Harbridge, also has a really good series that lays out all of our technique, sight reading, ear training examples all in one book. You can look at that from his website. That's andrewharbridge.com. Ear training, clap or playback or sing back at your choice, depending on the grade level. Chord identification, interval identification. We're no longer asking the cadence question. We found it was hard for teachers to find examples to be able to do that with students. It's something that I think is still very valuable. I know I'll be still teaching my students that question, but within the context of the exam, it gives you one less thing to have to prepare for. When it comes to keyboard harmony, we'll spend a few minutes now talking about how that's broken out so that you can see how it looks. I'm also going to upload a few new video tutorials in the coming weeks so that you can see even a little bit more detail how this works, but I'll give you an overview now. The new keyboard workbook, Keyboard Harmony, Harmonizing Made Fun, is by Deborah Wanless. There's 3 levels currently being published. Introductory level 1 is used with our grades 4 and 5. Intermediate level 2 is used with our grade 6 only. The advancing level 3 is used with grade 7 and 8. And she's working on a forthcoming level 4 book that we're going to use with our grade 9 and 10. That should be available sometime in the spring of 2019. The old Stephen Fielder Keyboard Harmony workbook is still available, actually. Apparently it's still in print, and Long & McQuaid still always has a few copies of that in their supply chain. You can order that through their website or by calling their Vancouver store. It's probably the best way to get your hands on that. The syllabus requirements won't quite match up with what we're doing, but it's full of really great examples still, I think. So those of you that still have old copies of that, you'll still find that a very valuable resource. Here's a look at what those covers look like. So if you're looking online or you're in the Long & McQuaid stores, you can order these on deborahwanless.com, her website, Long & McQuaid's website. The Long & McQuaid stores are stocking these 3 books, and again, a level 4 is to come, but you got an idea of what the cover looks like at least, and what those 3 different levels are called. If we look at the grade 4 requirement, we used to start keyboard harmony at grade 5. We decided to come back a level to grade 4. And we always have a progression requirement and then what looks like a lead sheeting requirement for students to actually harmonize and add chords to at the piano. The progression requirement here is just in 2 keys, C and G, and all it features are the 1 and 5, 7 chords. We don't make much reference anymore to 1 and 5, 7, but you'll see the chord symbols always placed there. In this case, C and G7. And these are just little shell voicings and outlines of these chords. Students have to play this as written on the exam, preferably with the pedal. That's C major. Students also have to be able to play that in G major from memory. And again, this example is given both in our syllabus and directly in the workbook. When it comes to the actual harmonizing, you can see here we have chord symbols on the page for C and G7, just 2 chords at grade 4 and grade 5. And then you get this lead line. So this is exactly the same actually as our contemporary idioms lead sheet reading from level 1. So we know that students can do this at a young level. We're not starting it in the classical syllabus until grade 4. So maybe what I'll do here, we want to have lead sheet style, which is 3 notes in the left hand, single notes in the right hand. The students will simply play that right hand melody in the treble clef with the right hand while they add chords in the left hand. I'll give you an overhead view of how this looks with my webcam so that you can see, and maybe I'll change my audio too so you can hear this a little bit better and you can see exactly how this would work. And then I'm just going to try and reorientate the camera so it's upright. Okay, so this is using that example on the screen. 3 notes in the left hand, single notes in the right hand. I'm also trying to use the pedal too. Forward. And you can see what needs to happen there. That's how grade 4 and grade 5 are going to go for that particular requirement. Very simple, and again, it's the same as contemporary idioms lead sheet reading. When we get to grade 6, we complicate things a little bit, but by this point, this is the 3rd year of harmonizing for students, so they have a better idea how to do this. We want students to get going with keyboard style, which is 3 notes in the right hand, single notes in the left hand. And so to do that, the preliminary chord progressions help students work through those right-hand chords in different inversions. So like this, again, I'm just going to change my audio so you can hear this a little bit. That's C and G chords, effectively 1 and 5, for those of us classically trained. Or the student could be asked to do 1 and 4 using C and F chords. And that's always for 2 marks. 2 marks on the exam goes for those chord progressions. The reason we do this then, when it comes to the actual harmonizing example, you can see again, we just have a simple lead line here with chord symbols listed above, but instead of putting the chords in the left hand, again, we want students to get these chords going in the right hand, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So I think what I'll do is I'll give you an overhead look again on this so you can see exactly what I'm doing. It's probably, I think, the single most difficult thing to teach students. And I sometimes even panic when I get a student ready to do it, but when I get 90 seconds into it, I realize, oh, actually, this is pretty easy for them. It was me that was unsure. So again, the trick here, we've got an F chord, so on the left hand, just using single notes. We mix the 1, 4, and 5 chords together for each example. And in the right hand, we have an F. Instead of playing a single note melody in the right hand, though, I want to add the chord, the F chord, under the base of the F. So I need to know that inversion. The second chord, we have an E, and I want to play the D chord. Always the E is on top with a single C in the left hand. Back to F. I need to tell it the F chord like B flat. B flat left hand. I like students to think left hand. Get that grounded. And then right hand, B flat on top of the B flat triangle. B flat chord. F with B on top. That's how that would look. That's an example of how grade 6 harmonizing looks. It doesn't get much harder than that. I think that's about as hard as it gets. It's just that we add other keys. In grade 6, we have to learn C major, G major, F major, and A minor. Most of that will be already familiar to them. It's just the idea of getting 3 notes in the right hand and learning how to manipulate those inversions. And that's where the previous chord progressions I showed you will come in handy. If we skip ahead to grade 8, really not much change. We're still using 1, 4, and 5. There's only 6 keys there to learn, and again, still keyboard style with 3 notes in the right hand, single notes in the left hand. If the student wants to go beyond that and play those left hand chord or notes as octaves or add interesting left hand patterns, they're welcome to do that anytime from grade 4 and up. Some students just have that gift or that ability, You may even choose to change chords instead of using a chord that's listed there. If they want to use a different chord because they're going to like the sound of it better, or they're used to playing 2 and 6 chords, or adding the dominant 7th, any of that's allowable right from the beginning through this whole thing. Examiners are going to really like that. But what we're giving you are the bare minimum requirements to do to be successful and to even score 5 out of 5 on the exam. So I'll take this grade 8 example. It's a little bit tough to play through in B minor, but I'll go through it slowly with an overhead shot again so you can see my hands, you can see exactly what's going on, to give you an example of how this works at this level. And I'll just reorientate that so that's right side up for you. So again, B minor, so I get my left hand grounded, and use the pedal. A little bit dancier there at the end. I'll break that down onto a video tutorial at some point that I'll post on the website so you can see exactly what I've done, and we'll talk about some of the more intricacies in this as time goes on in that series later. So that's harmonizing. It's about as hard as it gets, really. This is another great supplementary resource for extra practice, 153 fun tunes to harmonize for easy fake piano, also by Deborah Wanless, available at Long and McQuaid. Most stores have this in stock. And available on her website as well. Lots of extra practice for keyboard harmony or lead sheet reading. And we could also use this, I think, with contemporary idiom students. Lots of C major and G major examples in this resource. In the background information, this is where the examiner asks oral questions of the student. The students have to be able to define, point to, and explain signs, articulation markings, dynamics, tempo markings, musical terms as they're found in any of the pieces, the title, composer, and key without looking at the score, perhaps be able to explain the meaning of the title in places where the title may have a nice explainable meaning, nothing too esoteric there. Give relevant details about the composer starting at grade 4, and this is where details are readily available. So that, if we have most of these will focus on composers before 1900, but even modern contemporary composers that are still living, if the information is readily available online, that's fair game for examiners to ask nowadays as well. Questions about key structure, form, modulation, we're going to refrain from asking those now. We used to find that would really put students on the spot, would undermine their confidence, and a lot of people weren't confident giving gray answers. There's often no black or white reasoning, and students have to really have a lot of knowledge to be able to do that. I still think it's really important to teach, but within the concept and the parameters that the exam has, it really puts students on the spot, and they started to lose confidence, we noticed, after that component on exam and things after it. If they were to play other pieces, they would often be second-guessing themselves. So we decided to remove that question from the exam to make things a little bit more realistic. Going forward a little bit here, Conservatory Canada Teachers Facebook page. For those of you that are on social media and you're interested, we have an Instagram page. We have our regular Conservatory Canada page, but we have a closed group page for teachers that you just have to go to navigate to this page and ask to be approved to be a member, and I'll approve you. And you can join in on the conversation and get updates, maybe sometimes a little quicker than I may be able to email them out. If you don't receive regular emails from me, I send out to teachers usually at least once a month, maybe not so much in the summer months. But if you find that you haven't heard from me in a long time about the new syllabus or upcoming webinars, that kind of thing, let us know so that we can make sure that your contact information is up to date. We use the MailChimp program, which automatically cleans email addresses. If they bounce a couple of times to your spam folder, then it actually stops emailing you, even though we still have you on our list. So it is very easy for you to lose touch given the privacy laws that we have nowadays. So it's very easy to get you back on there though if you find that you feel that you might be missing some of the information. We generally don't do mail outs any longer. They're very, very expensive nowadays. And with electronic media the way it is, we find it quite easy to communicate things, changes, and information to teachers and parents this way using email. Our other contact information, I actually work from my home office in Thunder Bay, Ontario. We have a head office downtown London, Ontario. That's where Kelly Matthews, our registrar, is, and Laura Makowski, our office administrator. You can reach out to them anytime about any of your scheduling needs or syllabus questions. You can use our 1-800 number. These ladies actually will answer the phone, and if they can't, they'll get back to you within a day, if not minutes. You can reach out to me anytime with that email. That's my only phone line there. If you want to call and talk about, serious academic questions, talking about intricacies of the syllabus, I'll even sit down and work with you one-on-one if you want. If you have questions about how to implement some of these things within your studio, pedagogical issues, I'm willing to talk one-on-one with you anytime to go over that and make this as accessible as possible. We realize that these days there's a lot of change. A lot of studio teachers are sensing change, and some are having, or I think most of us are having a hard time trying to fit within that change and figure out how to, maybe validate the training we've had and pass that on to students who maybe don't seemingly want to have that level of training anymore. There are ways to do it, and we're here to help, and we hope that our new syllabi are offering you that option to do that and promote lifelong learning through music. www.conservatorycanada.ca, that's where all the information is on our syllabi, more video tutorials. I'm even going to be featuring a podcast series upcoming later towards the end of the year. Interviews with people like Christopher Norton, Scott McBride-Smith, Dr. Donald Cook, who's our founding director from years ago. Really fascinating stories, and all sorts of research goes into those. So hopefully you're going to enjoy that online content. I hope you enjoyed this online content. If you have any questions, reach out anytime. Take a look at the slideshow notes that are available on the website if you want to review, or feel free to watch this webinar on demand anytime. More of these will be posted in the near future. So thanks for your time and for considering Conservatory Canada and passing on your exam students to us. We really appreciate it. We're a registered charity. We're always looking for donations and ways to make ends meet and be able to keep sending examiners out into the field to do the assessments one-on-one wherever possible. We're really committed to that. We have probably the friendliest group of examiners in the world, and I think students really enjoy these interactions with them. So thanks for your attention, and hope you have a good day.